Hey over there, Joe Lunchbox.
And Joy Nightingale.
And today we've landed right here in Thiells, New York. Behind me it says the town of Haverstraw, but I read it was Thiells. I don't know. Maybe Thiells is in Haverstraw? Actually, no, I know that, because Thiells is actually a hamlet. Hamlet is a little part of a town, its own village, within a town that doesn't have its own government. But we're going off track. Sorry about that. What we're here actually to do is explore a spot called Letchworth Village. Now, Letchworth Village was a mental hospital that had a different concept. Instead of being an asylum style where everyone was in rooms, this was going to be an open air community. What they meant by that is, imagine having a self-contained village with all the patients that were part of the mental hospital. So the plan was originally, when it was built, there was 2,000 acres, and they were going to have a max of 2,000 patients.
Okay.
Now, they wanted to make it a functioning village, so the patients, based on their mental capacity, would have different jobs, be it cooks, be it work the farms. They had farms here, sew, clean, all those type of jobs that would make this a successful village. It actually had 130 buildings over those 2,000 acres and was more of like a dormitory style than an asylum style. Now, this sounds good in theory. This idea all came by a man named William Pryor Letchworth. That's why the name of the spot is Letchworth Village. You see, a little backstory about him. He was a businessman in New York State. He retired in 1873 at the age of 50 because he wanted to dedicate his life to philanthropy. And he had this idea and then he wanted to do so. By 1878, he was named president to the New York State Boards of Charity. And he had this idea, which we talked about, this open air concept. And this was what he was going to make happen. By 1907, the plans got approved by New York State. By 1909, they secured the land. In July of 1911, the first patient was admitted. Sadly, Williams Letchworth passed away before the first patient was admitted, so he didn't get to see his dream come true. This spot obviously had a good theory behind it, a new way of looking at things, but things don't always go as planned. By the 1930s, they already had 3,000 people here, and by the 60s, there was over 5,000 people here. Mind you, it was only supposed to hold 2,000, so they lost funding, lost staff, overpopulation. Things went terribly wrong with this new way of dealing with people with mental illness. Because of that, there was crimes against humanity and stuff like that, and things didn't go according to his idea of plans. And with that being said, in 1996, Geraldo Rivera did a special on Willowbrook, which is another mental hospital in Staten Island, and they also did focus on Letchworth Village. And because of that, Letchworth Village did finally get shut down, but a lot of these buildings still remain on the property, so we're going to walk around and see some of the buildings. We're not going in them. You're allowed to walk around the property, and that's what we're going to do. So step right up. Let's go for this ride. There are rules. Town of Haverstraw, Letchworth Village property, open daily from dawn to dusk. Persons must stay on paved surfaces at all times. That's why we will not be exploring any of the abandoned buildings. There are other YouTubers that you could search for to do that. We're just here to talk about the history of the land and what it's about. We're getting here at 8:30 in the morning. It's eerily quiet. You hear the birds out chirping. It is very surreal. Like, there's a lot of times you might come across an abandoned building, but abandoned communities is a different feel when it's building after building. And mind you, this was closed in 1996. We're only talking about 26 years ago. It looks like it was shut down a lot long ago by the state of some of these buildings. I always wonder when I see these buildings, because it was that community, what were the building used for? Like, this was a fully self-contained thing, which was part hospital, which was part dormitory. Where was their farm? They even had their own power station here, powering their community. Now, not everything still does exist. There's a golf course, there's a school on some of what was the property. But there's this little, I want to say like park, that has some of the buildings. As we showed you, the sign said stay on the trail. We don't condone it, but it is quite feasible. As you can see, fences are down and windows are out. If someone did want to go into the buildings, it is possible. The police do patrol the area though. So that's something someone would do at their own risk. Really see the ruin that was these buildings at one point. Definitely no more roof on this one, and the windows are all busted out. Look at the numbers, like C5 on the side of the building. It did have beautiful brickwork and the raw iron banister heading up to what would have been the front door of this building. Sort of see inside the building. Was once boarded up, it clearly could walk right in the front door. Around the property there are a lot of stuff like basketball hoops, some playgrounds. This being what it was, they said it was sad. When it first opened, a lot of parents that didn't know how to take care of their kids in New York City just sent their kids up the river to Letchworth Village. So a large of the population of the hospital, or the facility, let me say, was children. But through the history of this spot, not everything was terrible. This was a research facility, so things to learn more about mental illness were developed here, and other stuff that wouldn't do about mental illness, like immunologist, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Hillary Koprowski, I'm terrible with names, so I'm sorry if I messed it up, was the man who in 1948 invented the first polio vaccine. And after he invented it, he tested himself, but he was like, where could I test this on people? And since this was a research facility, he decided he'll test it on the children here at Letchworth Village. Not saying the morals, if that's right or wrong. The children were not unwilling, but unknowing what was happening, what they were being tested on. So he first tested it on a little 8-year-old boy, observed the boy for a while, and was like, there's nothing wrong, so let's test it on more people. And totally tested on 20 kids here. 17 built immunity to the polio virus, and there was no side effects in any of them, so then testing went on a larger scale. But to think that the first polio vaccines were tested in the United States here at Letchworth Village. So we come to what I'm figuring is another one of the dorms. See right inside. I love the vines overtaking the buildings. In our times, me and Joy explored a lot of abandoned buildings, and they're usually older abandoned than these are, and you definitely don't see like the curtains in those front windows, and it's very rare you still see glass in windows. Like the last building, we have another basketball court. The building entrance looks the same, so we're figuring these probably were the dorm buildings around the outside perimeter, but I don't know what the inner buildings would have been used for. I love stuff like this. This tree is growing out of what was once a tire, but to think that that tree had to be planted, because you ain't getting that tire off this tree anymore. And it's always going to live its life with a tire around its trunk. It's cool. Someone's like, how did someone get that tire over that tree? No, it was put there before the tree got there. Building definitely has a Walking Dead feel. Don't open. Dead inside. Painted on the door. A lot more graffiti, but what I love is, if you take a look at this vine coming down and wrapping around the banister and the poles of it. Again, another one that still has the same dormitory style. But this one, besides having the basketball court, also has a swing set. It's hard to imagine children playing here in that were living in this facility. This basketball hoop is another great example of nature reclaiming the stuff that was built. This other sport ball, you could barely even see with the vines wrapping around it. And the tree is actually growing into the top of the basketball hoop, the backboard of it. This big structure in front of us. Sadly, like I said, things didn't go as well as they hoped here. This building has a morgue in the basement. And later we're actually going to go check out a cemetery for a lot of people that did lose their lives here while under the care of Letchworth Village. Trying to make out the words on this building. It looks like it says congregation. So I don't know if this was an old house of worship here at Letchworth Village. And let me apologize if there is graffiti and there are offensive words or anything in it. I don't mean to be showing them. It's just there is a lot of graffiti on a lot of buildings. Congregation, B'nai Israel, Letchworth Village, 1972. We still see the Star of David before it says congregation. You still see the tiles on the floor and the peeling paint on the walls.
I wonder if the front has like how that had the little
description.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I do know is this one did have the morgue in it. It is a little spooky and eerie. Some people do say because of the deaths that happened here at Letchworth Village that a lot of these buildings are haunted. Believe it if you want. In this state, it has a horror film-esque feel. I could picture this abandoned mental hospital. A patient resenting the nurses and doctors. Could you see it? The lightning flash? The man with the axe behind the broken-out windows? Don't enter, kids. He's coming to get ya. It is quite funny. The pick up your dog waste sign is right above the no dumping sign. Get it? Like a dog's taking a dump. Posted no hunting, carrying, or discharging weapons of any kind. Oh no, we're breaking that rule. Because Joy's got the guns. As we're looking at all these buildings, we're trying to see the signs on the front, see if we find any that are labeled. Some were named after the first superintendent of this, Charles Little. The building that he actually was named after. It's interesting. We're right near Harriman State Park. Mary Harriman donated the money for that building. She used to donate money for this facility. And I don't know any of the other names. Like another key name here is George Jarvis. He was one of the head research doctors here. And I don't know if they named anything after him or not, but we're looking for stuff. Someone has been cleaning the land here. We have lots of piles of trees. I don't know if another building once stood here. Opposite side, we were over there before. You could do when you come here. It is a big loop to check this all out. See, there is ghosts. This guy says boo. I like this weird face spiked guy. A lot of the buildings, their structures going along the outside all look like mirrored images of that building. Looks like the building behind it. The buildings in the center are definitely the different designed buildings. And it's sad how a facility like this that was meant to do good ended up not being able to take care of the patients. And it's bad photos. I don't want to show any of them, but if you look up, you can see the terrible living conditions at the end of this facility. And it's sad how I feel it's not the facility that really failed the people. I mean, it did, but it's just because the government and society, there's not enough people working on mental health issues. Not enough funding went into the building. It was understaffed. It was not enough that they could handle the population. And all that is what failed the people that were being treated here. Still, to this day, mental health isn't addressed as much as it should be in our country. Talk to someone if you have to, because it's scary out there sometimes. I don't know. I think it's a subject that needs to be talked about more openly, honestly. It's funny. A lot of these are made out of fiberglass now. He's cast aluminum.
Old school.
Yeah. See this building labeled BSB? It's the word shelter pointing. I don't know if it's pointing to the next building or on the back. Figure if it was a self-contained community, it definitely probably would have had a fallout shelter. Interesting words written on this one. Please let us go. Imagine being a patient here admitted, not wanting to be here, stuck living your life here. Especially, you saw that playground. There was children that young. The children were playing here. This was their lives. Parents just abandoned them. It does have a basement. I wonder if that was where the fallout shelter was, where it says shelter. Alright, so we saw what remains of the hospital. I mean, there are a few more buildings. We probably passed, I would say, like a dozen buildings or so, maybe 15. Now, like I was saying, this property was massive. So we're going to actually now go where the Letchworth Village cemetery is. It is a little bit of drive because what was Letchworth Village, some parts of the town built up, developed on that land. So it's a little bit of a hike, but we're going to go check that out now. On the other side of the Palisades Parkway on this road called Cow Hollow Road, we come across Old Letchworth Village Cemetery, 1914 to 1967. Now, if you remember, I said Old Letchworth or Letchworth Village opened in 1911 and closed in 1996. Just think, only 3 years after the first patient was admitted, the first patient passed away. When you come to the grave, it's like no other grave I've been to. As you can see, there's very few tombstones and very few names to remember these people. They were just numbered, which is what makes me sad. You also notice the spacing between a lot of the graves isn't the normal 6 feet. That's because a lot of these people were children that passed away at Letchworth Village. They say on these hills in the cemetery, it's 900 shallow graves. Thankfully, over time, people did do research and found out everyone who is buried here, and there is now a memorial at the old Letchworth Village Cemetery. It's nice people still come visit the cemetery, leave flowers on people's graves. It's unusual. The very first tombstone that I saw and I came to look at is Eric Weiss, which was Harry Houdini's real name. This isn't Harry Houdini's grave. You can see this grave with an angel, Sylvia Marie Paulino. She was only 10 years old, 1954 to 1964. We have someone else, beloved son to Jack. This is Howard's grave, another 10-year-old boy. I am glad to see that some of the graves do have tombstones, but just seeing numbers is very weird. They were just bodies to this hospital. When we were walking around the grounds of Letchworth Village, there was a church, but it wasn't really there. It's still an active church. I don't know if that church was part of Letchworth and got converted or was built after Letchworth shut down. The only house of worship we saw in Letchworth Village was the temple. And when we're looking at a lot of the tombstones, we have a Star of David, another Star of David, some Hebrew. A lot of the graves are of people of Jewish religion. We don't know. Just an observation. Here we have a grave, and it's weird to say one of the older people in the cemetery, and the age is only 26 years old, Robert K. Johnson, beloved son and brother. The cemetery is built up this hill, and at the base of it is where now stands a monument remembering everyone that is buried here that passed away at Letchworth Village. Those who shall not be forgotten. You can see a list of that names. They say around 900 people in these shallow graves. Because a lot of them are children, we can see a lot of the offerings that people left for the graves. We have mermaids, playing cards, dinosaurs, transformers. I'm glad someone at least found the names of all those people. It's sad, like, it's not like it doesn't have the number next to it, like went with the name. So the graves, you don't know whose grave is technically whose, except for the few that have the tombstones. Giving names to souls forgotten no longer. So that brings a close to our time here at Letchworth Village in the old Letchworth Village Cemetery. I know it is a little more somber video than we usually make, but it still is interesting subject matter. This mental hospital was supposed to be so progressive at the time with the community aspect. Also all the research that was done, like the start of the cure for polio happened here, but then the sad stuff as we see with the cemetery behind us. So I think that could call it for now at this location. Letchworth Village, been there, done that. Remember folks, safe travels.
Good eats.
And live life.